have to write anything down for this next part. We are going to now get introduced to the quadratic formula. So this is part of 3.4. We're not going to do any examples in 3.4. We're going to show you how you can use an idea like completing the square to create a formula. So the formula that we're going to create is going to say if you have a whole bunch of numbers. So let's say I have 5x squared plus 30x minus 1 equals 0. What I have in that situation, you just have to watch. You don't have to write anything down. No, it's just we are going to complete the square on this side and write down our instructions as we go through them. Because what we're going to do on the right-hand side is do the same thing, saying, what happens if I had any number in front of my x squared, a different number or any number in front of my x, and any number by itself? What's the answer to this question in blue? What's the answer to this question in green? So starting with completing the square, what did we do first? We moved the 1 over to the other side. Okay? So we had 5x squared plus 30x equals 1. Okay? If I write an instruction, the instruction's coming before, so it shouldn't be in past tense. Move. I move the constant over. The constant's the term without any x's. What did we do next, in fact, in completing the squares? We factored out the 5. So what would that look like? 5x squared plus factor out the 5 plus 6x, leave some space, right? And add our spaces. This next section right here is technically the part where we complete the square. And we say that if I have a plus 6, this number inside is going to be half. So it's going to be plus 3. But if I have a plus 3 there, I need to square that and put plus 9 there. If I've added 9 there, that 9 gets multiplied by that 5. I've actually added 45 on the left, so I need to add 45 on the right. The next step, right? We get the squared term by itself. So if I want to get that x plus 3 squared by itself, I would need to divide both sides by 5. 46 over 5. And now square root. Remember the plus or minus. Finally, that's completing the square. The idea is you want to get something squared so you can square root it and then you can get x by itself. How do you get that something squared? We use a process called completing the square. So now we're going to follow this same process, but instead of using numbers, we're going to use parameters or variables a, b, and c that could be any number. And in the end, what's going to happen is we're going to create a formula that would let us skip all of these steps. Ooh, now you guys are happy. Can skip all of those steps. Just use a formula and plug numbers in and get the right answer right away. That might be nice. So how do we get this formula? And this formula is on your formula sheet, so you don't even need to be able to do a whole bunch of work. You can just plug things into your formula. So how do we complete the square? Well, the first thing we did was move the constant over. Let's do the same thing over here. Which is my constant term? That's my c, so I'd subtract c on both sides. Factor out the 5. So what do I have to factor out? I have to factor out an a. A little bit complicated here because what would go here? A times what is b? A times half of b would be half of ab. Close. B over a. Does it make sense if I multiply a times b over a? I'll just get b. And then we still have minus c. I'll leave a space here and a space there. Now we complete the square. So I'm going to have my a out in front. What went in here? If it was 6, we put 3. What was the idea that we used to get from 6 to 3? Half of it. So how do we cut this in half? Divide it by 2, or b over 2a. This is not pretty, right? But this is how you create a formula. What goes in the blue space? What went in the blue space? How did we get the 9? We squared the 3, right? So here, with a b over 2a, we're going to have to square that. B squared over 4a squared. If I do that, what goes over onto this side? You'd have to times it by a, perfect. And so over here, you would add b squared over 4a. So what am I left with over here? Negative c plus b squared over 4a. Before I square root it, what do I have to do? I have to get the squared through by itself. So I have to divide everything by a. So that will give me x plus b over 2a. Divide this by a. Now, one of the things that we did on the left-hand side is when we had 1 plus 45, we put it together as a single number because we could do that, right? 1 plus 45 was 46. We're going to take an extra step before I square root both sides, and I'm just going to add these fractions together. How do you add fractions? You need a common denominator. What would my common denominator be? 4a squared, so I need to multiply this one top and bottom by 4a. And then I would have a common denominator of 4a squared. And on the top, I'd have minus 4ac plus b squared. Are you okay if I write the b squared first and then the minus 4ac? Okay. Now we got our squared by itself. How do you get rid of something squared? Square root it. So if I square root both sides, this side just becomes x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus big square root of b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Last thing I need to do? solve for x. So I need to move the b over 2a over, plus or minus. I'm going to simplify this. Can you see on the bottom, if I keep the top the square root of b squared minus 4ac, what's the square root of 4? What's the square root of a squared? A. And since these have a common denominator, I could add these fractions, and this is the quadratic formula. And this formula means that if you want to, and it's not the prettiest formula, it's probably the biggest formula you've seen so far in math as far as stuff goes. But if I give you something like 3x squared minus x plus 2 equals 0. This is your a value, 3. Your b value is minus 1. Your c value is 2. And if you wanted to solve this, you could solve it this quick. My formula says negative b, so negative negative 1, plus or minus square root b squared, negative 1 squared minus 4, a is 3, c is 2. Oh, I'm going to change c. Okay, I'm going to just change c to a minus 2. Over 2 times a. Okay? If I simplify this, I get x equals 1 plus or minus 1, 12, 24, 25, over 6. X equals, what's the square root of 25? 5, 1 plus or minus 5 over 6. So there's actually 2 answers. 1 plus 5 is 6 over 6. One answer is x is equal to 1. The other answer is 1 minus 5 over 6. Negative 4 over 6, which is equal to negative 2 over 3. So it gives us another way of solving these just with a formula. So now we have 3 ways of solving quadratic equations. If you can factor them, and you're good at factoring, that's the fastest. You can complete the square, which is the slowest. If you have to complete the square, chances are the formula will be better. So this, in 3.4, we're going to be working with the formula.